GBNews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good morning. It is 9 a.m. This is The Briefing. I am standing in for Tom Harwood. Darren McCaffrey with you for the next 30 minutes. We'll have the latest on the Labour reshuffle. Who is up? Who is down? What does it mean for Her Majesty's opposition? Also, Barbados becomes a republic. Was it the right thing to do? And also, new COVID restrictions have come into place today in England. We'll be debating whether the government is being too cautious or not cautious enough. That and much more after the news. Rosie White.
I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 9 o'clock. MPs will vote on new COVID restrictions later as measures to combat the Omicron variant are enforced in England. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and public transport, not in pubs and restaurants. Travellers to the UK also have to take PCR tests and self-isolate until they receive a negative result. Adults aged 18 to 39 are being advised to take a booster jab 3 months after their second vaccine dose, and 12 to 15-year-olds are being told to take a second Pfizer jab 12 weeks after their first. 9 cases of the variant have now been identified in Scotland, and that brings the UK total to at least 12. EasyJet has posted losses of more than £1 billion for the second consecutive year because of the pandemic. The airline says it's also seeing signs of demand softening after the discovery of the Omicron variant, but added it's too soon to say what impact that will have on the industry. Despite the uncertainty, the company is still hopeful trading will return to pre-pandemic levels over its current year. France plans to present proposals on tackling the migrant crisis, opening the door to further talks with the UK. The French government says it will put forward a balanced agreement between the UK and the EU when it sends a letter to Boris Johnson today. The country's interior minister says talks could happen then very quickly if negotiations are held in a serious spirit. Footage has emerged which appears to show the moment a British F-35 stealth jet crashed into the Mediterranean during takeoff. The incident happened early this month on the UK's flagship carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. The F-35 dropped off the launch ramp just there without becoming airborne. The pilot can be seen ejecting from the jet. Well, the Ministry of Defence told GB News it's aware of the video, but it's too soon to comment on the causes of the incident. The MOD also says recovery efforts of the plane are ongoing. Around 1 million homes and businesses are believed to have been damaged by Storm Arwen. In Scotland, at least 17,000 properties were without power for a fourth night. And across the UK, engineers are working to restore electricity to more than 60,000 homes. Well, it's as part of the UK faced the coldest night of autumn so far. Day 2 of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial gets underway in just a few hours in New York City. The court's already been told that Maxwell, who was Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, preyed on vulnerable young girls for a decade and then served them up to be sexually abused. She denies the charges against her. The new Labour shadow cabinet will meet later today following yesterday's surprise reshuffle. The new lineup includes Yvette Cooper, who returns to Labour's front bench as shadow Home Secretary. David Lammy takes over from Lisa Nandy as shadow Foreign Secretary. And Wes Streeting is the new shadow Health Secretary. He's tweeted promising to make the NHS fit for the future. John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent, says the Conservatives now face a much tougher key opposition on key policies.
I think the Channel Crossings issue is something where Priti Patel is now going to find it really difficult. I mean, Yvette Cooper went toe-to-toe with Theresa May when she was Home Secretary. I mean, she understands these issues and she's extremely robust and good on the detail and will give Priti Patel a really hard time.
Prince Charles, has spoken of Barbados' appalling atrocity and history of slavery during the ceremony marking the country's transition to a republic. The Prince of Wales says it's something which forever stains our history, and the creation of the republic offers a new beginning. To mark the official change of power, the royal standard flag was lowered and replaced. The nation's first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, will now replace the Queen as head of state. Prince Charles says there's hope for the future of the republic.
The creation of this republic offers a new beginning, but it also marks a point on a continuum, a milestone on the long road you have not only travelled, but which you have built. From the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery,
Lionel Messi has taken home the men's Ballon d'Or for a record-breaking 7th time. The Paris Saint-Germain forward beat Bayern Munich's Robert Lewandowski and Chelsea's Jorginho's claim to football's most prestigious title. It's another trophy in his cabinet, and it comes after his first Copa America win with Argentina in July. You are up to date. I'll be back with your headlines in half an hour. For now, Darren McCaffrey and The Briefing.
Very good morning. Welcome to The Briefing. I'm Darren McCaffrey, filling in for Tom Harwood. Today we'll be discussing freedoms regarding those new COVID-19 restrictions which are back in place in England. And we'll be joined by monarchists to unpack the political implications of Barbados parting its ways with the Queen. But first, we're going to begin with the big political news today at Westminster, and that is that yesterday saw the latest big political shake-up within the Labour shadow cabinet, with a reshuffle. Most notably, Yvette Cooper becomes Shadow Home Secretary again. Emily Thornberry is demoted to Shadow Attorney General, and David Lammy is now going to be Shadow Foreign Secretary. However, it did appear to surprise some, not most notably, of course, their own Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, who was caught off guard. News of the reorganisation began yesterday during her very speech. The sources reporting she did not know the details of the reshuffle at the time. It is the second big shake-up that we've seen under Keir Starmer's leadership since he took over as Labour leader last year. But what is the significance of all of this? Well, delighted to say I'm joined by Peter Edwards. He's the former editor of Labour Lists and joins me now. Good morning to you, Peter. First of all, let's focus on some of the key names in all of this. Notable, as we said, Yvette Cooper back as Shadow Home Secretary and David Lammy now as Shadow Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, there's some familiar names, but Yvette Cooper's incredibly experienced. She was a minister in the last Labour government. She was Shadow Home Secretary. She was ferocious in taking on Theresa May and Amber Rudd in the kind of Ed Miliband era. And I think she was also very compassionate and thoughtful. Last time we had a migrant crisis, and it's sad we're having another one now. So I think it's a really good move, and it's quite rightly the kind of headline item from the last 24 hours in the Labour Party.
In saying that, we also saw some other significant moves, didn't we? Wes Streeting to Health replacing John Ashworth, who seemed to have done a pretty good job during the pandemic. And Lord Faulkner kicked out of the Shadow Cabinet altogether, replaced by Emily Thornberry.
Well, I thought John Ashworth did a great job. He's quite a wily Westminster operator. He worked for Gordon Brown before becoming an MP, but I thought he did really well as Shadow Health Secretary. And at times at the start of the pandemic, when I'm afraid Matt Hancock was flapping around quite a lot, that John Ashworth made mincemeat out of him. So I'm really glad that John Ashworth is still in the shadow cabinet and he's got an economic portfolio, and I think he'll make a big contribution.
So what do we make of the overall picture of this? There's lots of speculation this morning that this is a shift to the right by Keir Starmer. Is that your reading of it?
Well, I think we all like to put labels on a restructure. It's either, in the Labour Party, it's either shift to the right or the left. And in the Tories, it's either to the Brexity side or the Remainery side. But to me, it's come out quite well. First of all, it was completed within about 24 hours. So it was quite neat. We all know reshuffles can unravel at times, whatever party you're in. Secondly, there's a lot of experience in people like Ed Miliband and Yvette Cooper at the forefront, but also there's some good communicators. I mean, you mentioned Wes Streeting, who's been an MP for I think 5 or 6 years, but he's actually still, as far as I'm aware, just under 40. He's quite young. He's a good communicator. He's a thoughtful guy. He's certainly on the modernising wing of the party. Absolutely, he's been quite involved with progress. But then if you look at someone like Lisa Nandy, for example, her political background is quite different. She served under Ed Miliband. She's the MP for Wigan. So I'd be wary of putting too many labels on this. I think it's what the Labour Party should be, which is a broad church.
Love labels, Peter. Just in terms of the Angela Rayner stuff, what do you make of that? I mean, it was announced, wasn't it, during her speech? Was that necessary? Was this Keir trying to stamp his authority? Of course, they had a pretty big run-in the last time he tried to reshuffle his shadow cabinet.
Well, I don't think he's trying to stamp his authority per se. I think in terms of the timing of a reshuffle, you're absolutely damned if you do and damned if you don't. We're all conscious the last Labour reshuffle went on for a day or two, as I remember it. This one was dealt with quite quickly. And also, I think if you're the leader and you're moving people around, some people have to leave the shadow cabinet, unfortunately, then I think it's just good management and courteous to talk to the people directly affected. So if someone's losing their job, it's just shows a bit of humanity to talk to them first before talking to your colleagues. And I think in terms of the actual kind of news agenda, it's always going to be very packed because sadly we've got these coronavirus developments. We've also this morning got the head of one of the security services giving a round of interviews and giving a speech. So I think kind of get in on a Monday morning and get on with it actually makes a bit of sense when you look at what else is happening this week. Like the Labour Party does need to get a bit of coverage for what it's doing, even as Brexit and the pandemic and everything else kind of dominates our lives.
You're doing that this morning, or trying our best at least anyway. Peter, thank you very much indeed, Peter Edwards there, the former editor of Labour List on that reshuffle. Now let's head to Barbados, well, at least in theory anyway, because Prince Charles travelled there, of course, did need to attend a ceremony to mark the country becoming a republic, which came into effect at midnight local time. During his appearance, Prince Charles acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in the Caribbean, saying it forever stains our history. The Prince described how the creation of this republic offers a new beginning as he watched the Queen's standard be lowered for the final time. Well, Thomas Mates Archer Mills is the founder and director of the British Monarchist Society. He joins me now. Good morning to you, Thomas. I mean, this was inevitable in many regards, wasn't it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yes, well, it is sad for the Crown, and it is very sad for the relationship that the British royal family has had with the nation. But the right for a people to have self-determination is ever so important. And Prince Charles touching on that, it really showed us where the Crown and the monarchy is in the modern world. He went ahead and acknowledged Barbados and the horrible atrocities that they had experienced with slavery. We've not really seen that before in really any sort of ceremony that dealt with independence. I mean, we've had a few different countries within the Caribbean become republics, but there was never the emphasis on freedom and slavery. So politically, we're looking at a very sensitive topic here, especially with Black Lives Matter and that organization really having a foothold in Barbados. But it also brings us to the other side of the coin where we say, The way Barbados has become free was not through referendum. The government of the day unilaterally said, if the people voted for us to be in power, they're voting for us to be a republic. Well, just because you agree with the party's manifesto in certain points doesn't mean that you agree with all of the points. So to push through a republic without the voice and referendum of the people, there's something a little bit not right with that. How far are we looking at democracy? And how far are we looking at the government of Barbados right now, pushing this through without an absolute referendum and a voice of the people?
I think, Thomas, there's no sense that there's a big uproar about in opposition to this. I think there is general public approval of it. What does it say, though, you know, in 2021, this connection that the monarch does have with kind of countries that are, frankly, quite a long way away from the United Kingdom? Do you think it is becoming increasingly difficult, maybe for countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, others, to maintain that link with the monarchy in the era we now live in?
Yes, of course. And this is what we're seeing. I mean, we had back in the 60s, Trinidad, Tobago, a lot of those island nations went ahead and said, look, our head of state lives so far away. Of course, there is a link, but we think we need self-determination and someone who represents us. And that's a very good argument. However, the constitutions of these nations, when they became independent, they created a constitution which gave them their own crown. Therefore, a lot of the people in Barbados are saying, we don't need the British crown. We don't need the British Queen. Well, their own constitution has set up that Barbados is its own crown with its own crowned head of state. So the Queen in the realm countries such as Canada and Australia is not the British Queen. She is the Australian Queen in Australia. She's the Canadian Queen in Canada, the same as in Barbados. So this is very interesting to look at how the constitutions were created, what the legislative was actually given power to do, whether it is representing the crowned head of state or removing the crowned head of state. So this is a political implication that we're seeing here, that even though these countries are independent, they have retained a shared head of state in Her Majesty the Queen, but she's not British in those countries. She is of that country.
Just very finally, also, obviously, it was Prince Charles who carried out this ceremony. We are now seeing him in de facto taking on many, many of the roles that the Queen, of course, would have done given her age. Where do you feel the sense of public opinion is when he becomes King Charles? There's always speculation, isn't there, that actually some countries may then also reassess the link with the crown when Her Majesty finally passes away.
That's a very good point. And the thing is that that's already being done. And this is why Barbados chose to break free when they did. It's not a snub to the Queen, excuse me, or saying, well, we just don't have respect for you anymore. They saw the opportunity to say, you know what, the Queen has served us so well that instead of really making it that we don't want Prince Charles, let's do this now. Why upset the apple cart when he becomes king? And I think this is what a lot of people aren't understanding, is just how forward-thinking the Prince of Wales is. And with him being there shows that he is really a modern royal. He understands the difference between the crown and the government and the people. And by him being there, showing solidarity with a nation's right to self-determination, shows no animosity on behalf of the crown or him himself. I think he's very much ahead of his time and misunderstood and will be a great king. And as time goes on, people are seeing that.
OK, Thomas, really appreciate the thoughts this morning. Thomas Mace, Archer Mills, joining us, talking about what is happening there when it comes to Prince Charles and the handover there in Barbados. Now, let's move back home, because Brits who fail to wear a mask in shops and on public transport could face a maximum fine of £6,400 from today, and penalties of up to £200 will be handed to people in England who don't wear a face covering under new government rules to help stop the spread, of course, of this new COVID variant. Well, Richard Taylor is a Welsh political commentator and the host of Rich Politics, and joins me now. Not a happy chap, I can imagine, this morning, Richard.
Certainly not, Darren. It seems we're heading back to where we were at the start of all this, and this has been a complete overreaction from the government. I mean, we've even heard it from the government in Africa who've stated that, it's nothing to worry about. People have talked about some of the symptoms involved in this, what I call unicorn. I know your viewers call it something else. To me, it's absolutely an overreaction from our government to bring restrictions in again. And once again, Boris Johnson, the libertarian he's supposed to be, is showing his power by overreaching into our daily lives and telling people what they should do. We've had mask mandates here in Wales since I can remember. And yet, if you look at the case rates, they're still as high as they've ever been. So clearly, they don't work. They don't work certainly here in Wales, not in Scotland either. So mandating masks, certainly in secondary schools, they're talking about it as well. And of course, for our children as well, they've faced so much over the last 2 years, Darren, and now we seem to be heading back to where we were at the start of all this. For a virus, quite simply, that we've got to learn to live with. The Sunday
Indeed,
papers
Richard, but the point is, the point is, though, that, of course, the vast majority of scientists do think that masks do help prevent the spread of this. And also, we don't know that much about this new variant. Why is it not right that the government is slightly cautious? It's not that big a deal to have to wear a mask at certain points of the day, is it?
Well, haven't most of the population now been vaccinated? Haven't people got antibodies?
We don't know, Richard, if the vaccines are going to be as effective against these variants. I'm just suggesting the government's not expecting us to do an awful lot, which is to wear a mask at certain points of the day and to isolate when we come back from travel abroad. It's not exactly a big ask.
Yeah, but it's not just that, is it? It's connected to all the other stuff we've had to face. And we're seeing it here in Wales. For example, I was at Cinema and Co yesterday, a cinema that has been shut down by the Welsh Government for refusing to implement vaccine passports. Yet opposite, there's a pub that was packed with people that didn't have to show one, all sat close to each other, talking and drinking. Now, come on, it doesn't make any sense. But then you go to the cinema across the road, you have to present a vaccine passport. Some will say Boris hasn't done that yet. Mark my words, he's heading down that road. This is just a slow introduction and it's a nudge towards what he's seeking to do. And I'm afraid that we've got to start to learn to live with this virus, as we've done with the common flu, the cold. For some reason, the government overreacts when there's a new variant. I mean, to me, it's just an overreaction. And I think the government...
But it's not an overreaction. They're just being cautious. 150,000 people have died in this country, almost, of this virus. For lots of their relatives, this is not an overreaction. And we could well see lots more people die this winter. We know the National Health Service is already stretched. Look, frankly, you're not on the side of where most public people are. People want to be cautious. They want to protect their loved ones, particularly those that are vulnerable. And if that means wearing a mask, it's not the most outrageous thing in the world to have to do.
Well, that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. But my opinion
it's not my opinion. It's the opinion potentially of 150,000 relatives, or relatives of 150,000 people who've lost their lives because of this virus.
But don't forget, we had 60,000 people normally die of flu every year. We didn't have anyone die of flu last year. So let's be honest with the figures. And let's be honest
we still expect people, if you've got the flu or the cold, to probably not come into work and not to spread viruses around. I'm sorry, Richard, but frankly, most people are not on your side on this issue. Most people think it is not that bad to try and protect people, to be cautious about a new variant, when a virus has killed 150,000 people in this country.
So you would be happy for us to be masked up for the foreseeable future, to carry vaccine passports and to mandate vaccines, would you, Darren? Would you think that would be a good thing?
All I'm suggesting is that I think most people feel that it is right the government is cautious about something we don't know about yet.
Well, we know enough that the symptoms, we've already been told by the South African and African governments that it's nothing to worry about. So why are we overreacting? It's an absurd reaction to me, in my opinion, that the government's taken, and I don't believe it's the right thing to do. That's my opinion. And you say 150,000 people. I need to add, we don't know the full figure yet, because people die from COVID and with COVID, and we've never been given those details by the government. It's never been published on mainstream media.
Sorry, Richard, we do know that there were excess deaths last year. A lot more people died last year than they had done in the previous average of the previous 5 years. So we do know people are dying of this virus, very sadly. All I would add is the government, in England at least anyway, have put a month on this. They say that many of the mask mandate rule will come to an end on the 21st. When we know a bit more about this COVID variant, it is possible things, of course, will get extended. But do you not get this sense that actually, there are people who, of course, agree with you, and I'm sure people will email in and they will agree, but the vast majority of British public don't agree with you. They do want the government to be more cautious of anything. They think the government wasn't cautious enough in the first place back in March of last year and indeed this time last year?
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that people should be able to weigh up the risks themselves and take personal responsibility. And I think we've lost trust in the public, and the government certainly has. I mean, if a person feels they need to wear a mask, absolutely fine. I have no issue with that. If someone wants the vaccine, take it. And yes, the vaccine has worked to reduce the deaths that we've seen with the elderly and the most vulnerable. We know that. But we've been told by Boris Johnson now the vaccines don't work because of this new variant. Are we going to hear this every single year when a new variant comes, Darren? We're going to have boosters continually. Where is this going? And let's not forget, the big pharma companies are making billions and billions of pounds off the back of this. And those are the questions that I like to ask because they're just as important as actually mask wearing, restrictions, and all the other things we're discussing here with you this morning.
OK, Richard, appreciate your thoughts. Always keen to get a wide range of views here on GB News. Thank you very much. That is Richard Taylor there joining us from Abergavenny in Wales. Now, staying in Wales because property owners there will be offered money to rent to homeless people in a bid to end the housing crisis. The Welsh Government will unveil the Ending Homelessness Action Pact at the Senate later on today. Part of the strategy will include offering a 5-year funding pot worth £30 million to help local authorities encourage people to allow their properties to be used as affordable homes. Well, Sam Rowlands is a Conservative member of the Welsh Parliament for North Wales and a member of the Local Government and Housing Committee and joins me now. Very good morning to you, Sam. This is a really interesting initiative. Just give us a couple of more details about what you and others are planning.
Yeah, so I'm not a member of the Welsh Government here in Wales, obviously. So it's a Welsh Government initiative. Looking to put £30 million towards tackling homelessness, and obviously any sort of funding to tackle homelessness is welcome. But I think what we are looking at, though, is a sticking plaster over what is a significant issue for many people here in Wales. And actually what the government is not doing is tackling some of the fundamental issues which are causing homelessness, such as it's basic things like not enough houses being built here in Wales. We've had decades of nowhere near enough houses being built in Wales, and now we're seeing some of those symptoms coming out where people are just struggling to get on the housing ladder.
Indeed, but how big a problem? Because obviously, we have to differentiate, don't we, between people who unfortunately end up sleeping on the streets and homelessness, because they are two different categories, aren't they? How big a problem is homelessness in Wales?
Well, according to the Welsh Government figures, they say that in recent times, over the pandemic, around 15,000 people have experienced homelessness in its broader definition. So there obviously are some challenges for a relatively small country here in Wales. That 15,000 people over the pandemic have been registered as being homeless. So there are issues, and there is a need to tackle that. £30 million to support the private rental sector is probably not the worst idea in the world, but it's not a silver bullet. There are fundamental underlying issues, a significant one of which is not enough houses being built. You have to ask, Darren, why are developers moving out of Wales? Why are developers no longer seeing Wales as a place to build houses? Why is it they see Wales as perhaps an unwelcome place for houses to be built? And you look at, I don't normally look to Scotland for policy, but they've got a housing policy or a housing strategy up to 2040. So they're looking decades ahead as to how are they going to make sure there's a right number of houses for the residents that they serve. We're not seeing that same sort of thing here in Wales. It's a short-term thinking, and yes, there are some short-term solutions that need to be put in place. What we really need is a strategy which tackles housing in the long run here in Wales.
Well, many people would say, and we know that housing, for example, housing stock in England, I think there were fewer houses built in England last year than the government's target, which is around 250,000. This is not necessarily a party political thing. What people would say potentially the solution to this is more social housing, is going back to what we used to do in this country in the 50s, 60s and 70s.
Yeah, we certainly support some social housing. Actually, this is about having appropriate housing, because it's what's appropriate for people who need it. So there is a need perhaps for some social housing. There's also a need for, of course, affordable private housing, as well as there's need for housing which is appropriate for an older an ageing population, and perhaps those with disabilities as well. So what we really need is Welsh Government to come forward with a housing strategy which looks at what is appropriate housing for the needs of the people that we serve here in Wales. Yes, some of that is social housing. There's lots of different types of housing which is needed, and not just a short-term plaster over a wound at the moment.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam Rowlands there, who is a Welsh Conservative member of the Scottish Parliament, joining us from North Wales. OK, that is it from the briefing for now. I'll be back at 3 o'clock. We are expecting the Prime Minister to make a briefing in Downing Street at some point this afternoon. We'll bring you that live, of course, on the latest on the vaccine rollout. All over 18s expecting to get that in the weeks to come as the time difference is brought down from 6 to 3 months. But up next, it is To The Point. Patrick is back, you'll be delighted to know, alongside Mercy. But before that, it's a drab Tuesday. Here's the weather from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. It's nothing like as cold out there this morning compared to yesterday. It's a fairly drab Tuesday, though. A lot of cloud around, and most of us will see some rain and drizzle at times as well. Weather systems coming in from the northwest, bringing rain and drizzle, particularly to western parts of Scotland, but also